Located in the West Farm section of the Bronx in New York City was the building for the Happy Land Social Club. But in November of 1988, the building was inspected and was found to have multiple fire code violations, specifically a lack of fire exits, fire alarms, or sprinkler systems in place. Though after being ordered to shut down, the fire department never followed up to make sure it actually happened. So the club continued its illegally. On March 25, 1990, about a year and a half after the club was ordered to close its doors, the building was filled with close to 100 people drinking and enjoying the night in the club during the Easter weekend. 35-year-old Cuban refugee Julio Gonzalez was inside arguing with his then-girlfriend who worked at the club. She grew frustrated with him and told him she didn't want anything to do with him anymore and had him thrown out at around 3 a.m. An angry Gonzalez walked to a gas station nearby where he purchased about $1 worth of gasoline before returning to the club. He spread the gas at the base of the staircase, the only entrance to the club, before igniting it. Immense panic ensued among the patrons inside, many attempting to punch holes through the wall to escape, while others were trampled to death as people stormed the exit, only to discover that this was where the fire was coming from. The piercing screams echoed for miles. In total, 87 people died in the fire, most from asphyxiation or trampling. It was even said that the club filled with toxic smoke so quickly that some victims were found dead, still with drinks in their hand. Around 150 firefighters arrived at the scene and had the fire extinguished within about 5 minutes, but it was too late for most everyone inside. It was confirmed that only 5 or 6 people there that night survived the blaze. The incident was reported as the deadliest fire in American history at that time, taking the spot from the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, which also took place in New York City in 1911, coincidentally on the same exact day as the fire at Happy Land, March 25th. Gonzalez was caught and arrested soon after and was found guilty on 87 counts of arson and murder, receiving 25 years per count. He died of a heart attack in prison on September 13, 2016, at the age of 61.
Investigators know what happened at Luby's, but they still don't know why George Hennard went on the shooting rampage.
On October 16, 1991, a man named George Hennard drove his 1987 Ford pickup truck to a Luby's cafeteria in Killeen, Texas. Upon arrival, he hit the accelerator and crashed through the front window of the restaurant just before 12:40 p.m. Inside, about 150 people crowded the restaurant. They began to panic as the following chaos ensued. 35-year-old Hennard, who was allegedly a reclusive man with a short temper and a strange hatred for women, began firing from his truck with his Glock 7 and Ruger P89 pistols. He then exited the vehicle before shouting, "All women of Killeen and Belton are vipers. This is what you've done to me and my family. This is what Bell County did to me. This is payback day. He began circling the restaurant, shooting both men and women alike, though it was said that he would yell profanities at specifically women before killing them. In the middle of the rampage, he approached a woman clinging to her baby, and surprisingly allowed her to leave, finding some strange sympathy for her in the midst of his awful killing spree. Police arrived a few minutes later and engaged in a brief shootout with Hennard, who retreated to the back of the restaurant near the restrooms. He was ordered to surrender, but he refused, claiming that he intended to kill more people, after which he was shot twice in the abdomen by police. Now running low on ammunition, with an injury getting progressively worse, Hennard loaded his final shot into his pistol, which he turned on himself, ending the massacre. In total, he had murdered a whopping 23 people, 10 of whom were shot in the head at point-blank range, and he injured 27 others. At the time of the incident, it was the deadliest mass shooting by a lone gunman in U.S. history, only being surpassed 16 years later by the shooting at Virginia Tech. "20-year-old Eric Houston was a former student at Lyndhurst High School in Olivehurst, California. He was allegedly angry with the school over the fact that he had not graduated and had recently lost his job. He claimed to have held a grudge towards his old civics teacher, Robert Brenz, because he had failed his class, which was a huge contributing factor to him not being able to graduate. On May 1st, 1992, Houston entered the school towards the end of the school day at 2:40 p.m., carrying with him a 12-gauge shotgun and a .22 caliber rifle. He first found Brenz in the civics classroom, where he was then shot and killed by Houston. He then fired at a 17-year-old student in the classroom, Judy Davis, killing her also. Houston then exited the classroom before fatally shooting another student, Jason White, in the chest. As he walked down the hallway, he saw another student by the name of Angela Welch. He then aimed his shotgun at her, but before he could fire his weapon, 16-year-old Beeman Hill shoved her out of the way, saving her life and taking the shot to his head, killing him instantly. Next, Houston entered a classroom where around 25 or 30 students were cowering and decided they would all be his hostages. Wanting more people, he sent student Andrew Parks to go and gather more students to bring back to the classroom. Houston had allegedly threatened to kill more students if he didn't return. Eventually, about 80 students filled the classroom, and thus began a grueling standoff between Houston and police. But 8 long hours later, he surrendered. On September 21st, 1993, Houston was found guilty on all charges and was sentenced to death for taking the lives of 3 students and a teacher, as well as injuring 9 others in the attack. Eric Houston awaits his execution on death row to this day. In July of 1993, 19-year-old Nathan Dunlap was fired from his job at a Chuck E. Cheese restaurant in Aurora, Colorado, after a disagreement between him and his supervisor over his work schedule. He was allegedly extremely angry after being fired, going so far as to tell an acquaintance that he planned to, quote, get even about his termination. Dunlap had a troubled childhood, never knowing his biological father and having a mother who struggled with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. He was said to have developed a lot of problems because of this. Dunlap supposedly attempted suicide at least 2 times in his early teenage years, which led to him being evaluated by a psychologist at the age of 14, who stated that his results revealed signs of hypomania, a condition in which you display a revved up energy or activity level, causing strange mood or behavior. Unfortunately, however, there was no follow-up or further treatment following his diagnosis. On December 14, 1993, approximately 5 months after being fired, Dunlap returned to the Chuck E. Cheese, where he hid in a restroom at about 9:50 p.m. after first ordering a sandwich and playing some arcade games. He exited the restroom at about 10:05 after the restaurant closed for the night, carrying a .25 caliber semi-automatic pistol. He first fired a shot at 19-year-old Sylvia Crowell as she was wiping down the salad bar. She was hit in the head near her right ear, which ultimately killed her. He then fatally shot 17-year-old Ben Grant in the face near his left eye as he was vacuuming the restaurant. Dunlap then approached 17-year-old Colleen O'Connor, who sank to her knees before pleading with Dunlap to let her live. But in response, he placed his pistol to the top of her head and fired a round directly into her brain, killing her instantly. Returning from a smoke break, unaware of what was going on, 20-year-old Bobby Stevens walked into the kitchen of the restaurant through the back door to begin washing silverware. Dunlap entered the kitchen and fired a shot at Stevens, hitting him in the jaw. Steven fell to the floor and played dead as he waited for Dunlap to leave the area. Dunlap then forced 50-year-old store manager Marge Kohlberg to open the safe before shooting her in the head after it was open. After a few seconds, he noticed that she was still moving, so he fired another shot into her head, this time killing her. Dunlap then fled the scene with $1,500 in cash and game tokens, but was arrested 12 hours later at his mother's apartment after an injured Bobby Stevens was able to escape the restaurant and alert authorities of the situation. Dunlap was found guilty on 4 counts of first-degree murder and attempted murder, among other charges, and was sentenced to death by lethal injection. He was set to be executed in 2013, but his execution date was postponed and eventually commuted to life in prison with no chance of parole after Colorado abolished the death penalty in 2020. He remains in prison there, rotting away as he continues to serve his life sentence. Orville Lynn Majors graduated from the Nashville Memorial School of Practical Nursing in 1989. After attaining his nursing license, he took a job at the Vermilion County Hospital in Clinton, Indiana. It was said that he was one of the most popular nurses there among patients, though a strange trend began to be noticed in direct correlation to the occurrence of overall deaths at the hospital when Majors was on the clock versus when he wasn't there. An average of 26 deaths occurred at the hospital every year before Majors' arrival, but after he began working there, that number spiked all the way to over 100 every year. This was a ratio of nearly 1 out of every 3 patients admitted to the hospital dead. A curious supervisor decided to look into the increase in deaths and wanted to see who was on the clock when they were occurring, only to find that Majors was on duty for 130 of the 147 deaths that took place at the hospital over the past couple of years. She alerted authorities to her findings, and Majors was suspended pending the results of the investigation. It was determined that when Majors was on duty, there was an average of 1 death every 23 hours, or basically 1 death per day. And when he was off duty, the rate dropped from 1 death every 23 hours to 1 death every 23 days. A clear, massive difference. Majors adamantly denied any wrongdoing, though several relatives of his patients who died came forward to report strange behavior from Majors. They recalled their loved ones dying within a couple of minutes of Majors giving them injections, and in some cases, death occurred before he even left the room. It was noticed that several patients had heart widening when Majors was on duty, which meant that there were only 3 explanations: a potassium overdose, a sudden heart attack, or a clot in the lung. 15 patients who died after being given injections by Majors were exhumed, and it was determined that none had signs of heart attack or clotting in the lung, which clearly meant that they were murdered. After a 2-year investigation, Majors was arrested and charged with 7 murders, though it was believed that he killed 100 to 130 people in total. He was found guilty of 6 of the 7 murders, and he received 6 consecutive terms of 60 years, or 360 in total. No real motive was determined other than a few witnesses claiming that he hated elderly people and he believed that they should be, quote, gassed, though these claims cannot be absolutely proven to be true. Majors died in prison on September 24, 2017 of heart failure, ending this twisted tale with 1 final death.
Tonight, the man convicted of killing 6 people while working as a nurse at a central Indiana hospital has died. We've learned 56-year-old Orville Lynn Majors died Sunday after suffering from breathing problems and dying at the Indiana State Prison in Michigan City. An autopsy shows Majors had heart problems and died of natural causes. Majors, once nicknamed the Angel of Death, was given a 360-year prison sentence after his conviction in 1999. Investigators say he gave lethal injections of heart-stopping drugs to patients at the former Vermilion County Hospital in Clinton.